welcome to Good Grief, the podcast dedicated to demystifying and destigmatizing grief with compassion and humor. I'm Nikki, I'm an end-of-life doula and a grief coach in Columbus, Ohio. And today we're going to be talking about how to plan a funeral. Everybody's favorite thing to do on a Saturday afternoon. So yeah, planning a funeral seems like it should be pretty straightforward, but there's a lot to it. So I thought I'd kind of go into this a little bit. But I have to say at the very beginning of this episode, as a caveat, I am not a licensed funeral director. I am not a mortician. I am in no way associated with any funeral industries. These are things I have found that are easily accessible to anybody online. I'm even going to link the article I'm pulling a lot of this from in the description below. So please feel free to refer to that. And also remember that the rules, regulations might vary state to state or city to city, or even within the cemetery of choosing if burial is, you know what, we'll get into that. But I just got to get that legal mumbo jumbo out at the top of the show to cover my butt. If you listen to my episode on litigation issues for doulas, you will understand why I'm bringing this up right now. So just a little CYA at the top of the episode. And also, hey, did you know I have a Patreon? I do, you guys. I totally have a Patreon. I feel like I may have mentioned it once or twice on this podcast, but if you head on over to patreon.com/NikkiTheDeathDoula, for as little as $1 a month, you can help me provide pro bono work to those who cannot afford my services. I do have a pro bono client I've been working with. I've mentioned on this show before. Obviously, I can't share any information about that client because of HIPAA regulations, and that's just unethical and mean. But I do have a client that I work with periodically who cannot afford my services, and thank you to my patrons who can help make this happen. So thank you. If you would like to be super awesome, head on over to patreon.com/NikkiTheDeathDoula. And you can get early access to my podcast. You can get grief affirmations and access to other bonus content, as well as a discount code for my workbooks that I sell online at NikkiTheDeathDoula.com, and sometimes free admission to workshops I provide. So there you go. Lots of great benefits for coming over and supporting me. All right, now on today's episode, let's talk about how to plan a funeral. So as I mentioned, I pulled a lot of this from a single article, but I also have done a little more research, and I will put definitely a link to the article in the description and anything else I might reference. So check the show notes if you're so inclined to check out some of this extra information. And I always encourage people to do a little bit of research on their own. I can do research all day long. I can tell you what I know. I can tell you what I have found. But in the end, any decisions around the end of life belongs to you, to whomever is the dying person. And I talk about this all the time with my clients. And when I talk about what I do as a death doula, I'm there to advocate for the patient and their family members. But in the end, the decisions are up to the dying person. I always tell them they're the ones in the driver's seat. They get to make the choices. So when possible, let's put that caveat in there too, because as I learned firsthand, sometimes the inevitable happens when you least expect it. My brother died unexpectedly, and my parents had not even begun the process of thinking of their own funeral arrangements and what they wanted done after death with their bodies and where they wanted to have their final resting place. They had made none of those decisions yet, and the decision was suddenly thrust upon them for my brother and for us as a family. So if you can get this done, I'm always saying that, if you can get this done ahead of time, awesome. I was just texting with a friend of mine this morning who was asking me some questions about getting things like, she's my age. We're the same age, I believe, and we're very close in age. She has 2 kids, and she has seen firsthand also what happens when somebody dies when nothing is in place. So she wants to have all that taken care of ahead of time. And what a beautiful gift for your family. So let's talk about how to plan a funeral and how to plan your final arrangements. So first and foremost, talk about it. Even if you don't have anything in writing, or if you haven't gotten that so far as to make anything formal, talk to your friends and family. Talk to people who are in your life. Talk to your loved ones, your spouse, your significant other, whoever it might be, and let them know broad spectrum what your wishes are. Especially if it comes down to a religious preference or a religious rite, some cultures and religions, the body has to be in the ground within a certain amount of time, within 24 hours, typically. Or some people might just have a strong belief that they need to be cremated or, whatever. Any of my supernatural friends out there, supernatural family friends, people who love the show Supernatural, salt and burn me. But if you have very specific wishes, make sure those are known. If nothing else, have that bug in somebody's ear. I questioned my parents a lot prior to my brother's death, and of course there's the don't be morbid, Nikki, we're not going to die tomorrow. And that's true. They're still with me. But I had no idea if we had like a family plot somewhere already, or if I know they have relatives, some great, however far back relatives of mine are buried here in Ohio, but I didn't know if they wanted to be near them or if they wanted to be, because my parents were raised in a different part of Ohio. Did they want to be near them? Did they want to be here in Columbus? So I tried to have those conversations. I've already, I change my mind all the time too. And I'm always telling my husband what I want this week. I have in writing currently in my final will what I would like done, but I'm also telling him, if composting becomes available, I want to do that. So I keep him abreast of my current decisions, but there is something in writing as far as what my husband can do with my remains if I were to pass away anytime soon. So he knows, he's got that. Yeah, but just don't be afraid to have these conversations. And I talk about that a lot and talk about going to death cafes or just being open and honest. Like, start these conversations. There are so many people that come to my death cafes because they are thinking about these things and their family is either giving them pushback or is just a little bit adverse to having these conversations. And they're ready. They want to talk about this and they don't feel safe or welcomed discussing this with their family. So don't be afraid to have these conversations. And I've talked a little bit about how to start the conversation, how to start this topic. So in other episodes, but start gently. Let somebody know in your life, hey, I'm thinking about this. I just want to make sure these things are taken care of, or I have very specific wishes. And, give them time. Let them come down to your level when they're ready. Okay, something else you can do to start preparing for this. Start getting your obituary information together, or write your obituary. You're allowed to do that. This is something I do with and for my clients a lot. I have helped them pre-write their obituary, or at least gather the information they need to put together an outline for their family. So that is one thing the family doesn't have to do. Sometimes though, and I will never just take this job from the dying person or from their family, neither will Ari. I will never just take this, because sometimes for folks, it's a good way to get some closure, to sit back and write these things out and, remember some good things about their family member, their loved one, or just kind of look back at their roots, where they came from. But start gathering that information, if nothing else. Things like date of birth, obviously date of death will be available at the time. Any details about their personal interests or life stories, big accomplishments they've had, as well as any organizations they belong to, things like that. And lists of surviving relatives, spouses, grandchildren, all that. I will say, and I have mentioned this in previous episodes once or twice, but I always caution people about the level of detail of information to put in obituaries and to really think about some of the things you're putting in there. Because as much as this sucks, identity theft of the deceased is a thing, and it happens a lot. So you might want to avoid things like the deceased's mother's maiden name, specific addresses they've lived at. These are all questions that can be asked to fill out, credit applications or security questions. So just think about certain things that are in there. Maybe leave off some sensitive information. Next thing, start thinking about what you want done with your remains. Do you want to be buried, cremated, composted, natural burial, whatever. There's a million different options out there. I've discussed them multiple times on this podcast, but think about what you want. And then from there, start doing your research, right? Like I've mentioned natural organic reduction a few times, also known as composting. This is something I would love. It's not legal in my state though, so I can't do it here. There are places where I could go to have it done, but that would be a huge expense on my family's behalf to transport my body there after my death. So currently, I have other options in place, but that is something I'm hoping will be legalized at some point here. And if not, I know there are places that this can happen. There's also aquamation. Again, there's a bunch of different options. I have discussed them in detail in other episodes, so I'm going to leave those off here, but start making the decision of what you want done with your remains, and then start gathering information on, can I pre-purchase this? Is there a provider I like better than others? Start looking at providers. You know, if you want to go through a funeral home to have a celebration of life or a funeral at the home, what do they charge for that? What is included and what is not included? And what are their regulations on embalming? Things like that. Because if you really do not wish or cannot be embalmed because of religious preferences, make sure that they don't require that. There is no, I've said it before, but I will say this anytime anybody listens, there are no laws in the United States that require embalming, period. None. It is not a requirement by law. If you are told that, you are being lied to. So the funeral home itself might have a policy on that though. So if you have a funeral home you really like and that's in their policies, you know, not a whole lot you can do with that outside of finding another funeral home. So, but start thinking about if there's a facility you would like to use, or if you'd like to do a home funeral. Start looking into the regulations in your area on how to do that and who can help with this. Again, you have the right to do these things, okay? If you are thinking about going with burial or cremation, do you want to have a casket? Do you want to have a wicker basket? Guys, there are so many cool options out there, and I'm not kidding you. You can buy caskets on Etsy. I like that myself. Well, I'm not a big fan of Etsy, but there are handcrafters that will make beautiful wicker baskets. They will make handcrafted caskets. I've seen some cool caskets online, you guys. There are artists out there that will carve out like shapes. Like if you're a really avid boater, they'll make boats. They will make spaceships. I've seen shuttles. I've seen motorcycles. I've seen all sorts of really cool hand-carved caskets you can buy. So, and you have that option. If you are going to a funeral home and they insist you buy a casket from them, find another funeral home. Let them know, I've pre-bought this casket. It's in my garage right now. I want to use it. You know, that is your right. You can do that. Do you, in instances of green burials, do you want, you know, just to be wrapped in linen? That's an option as well. Some type of biodegradable fabric. These are questions, if you are going with burial, you will have to ask with the cemetery that you are looking at. And that's the next option, is thinking about choosing the location of your interment. So if you have a specific cemetery where a lot of your family members are and you want to be with them, great. That is beautiful. Go out and talk to them, learn their regulations and their rules. What are their policies? Are they going to require a grave vault? Are they going to require specific things due to the ecological restrictions in that area? Like, go out and have those conversations, find out what is allowed and what is not allowed so that you can make your decisions from there. So then, yeah, next on the list is choose your place of interment. Do you want to be buried? And if so, do you have a place in mind? I have to throw this out there. If you want to be buried somewhere other than a official whatever cemetery or, you know, burial ground, please do it legally. Please get the permits necessary for the state, city, jurisdiction, whatever of that location. Do not go burying grandma somewhere illegally, okay? Look into the regulations of the area. Gotta say it, because I know people give me that wink and a nod all the time that they're going to bury grandma in their backyard. Please, I can't advise anybody to do that. Please don't. I would hate to have grandma dug up at some point and reburied. So look into the regulations of the area where you are before you just go digging a hole. Okay. So the article I'm going to link in here where I'm getting a lot of this from, they do have a nice little tip here, and I'm going to throw this in too because this is something I did know. The Federal Trade Commission's funeral rule does not cover cemeteries and mausoleums unless they sell both funeral goods and services. So I talk all the time about the transparency when buying any of your end-of-life services as far as funerals, cremation, burials, all that. The FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, does regulate that. They have to be transparent with their costs up front, so there are no sneaky hidden fees. This doesn't cover cemeteries. So keep that in mind. Your cemetery might sneak in a little hidden fee when the ink is dry after your signature. They might throw something else in there, and they can do that. They can basically do whatever they want. I had one toe on that soapbox, stepping back down again. Okay. So if you are going with burial, do some research. Hopefully you're doing this early enough that you have some time. Okay. Ask your friends and family members if they want to be involved in helping you look for this, especially like in the case of my parents looking for where they wanted to, inter my brother. We had him cremated, but, they wanted to have some type of headstone, just a physical place that could be our mark in history, which is a beautiful, beautiful gift. And we bought a family plot, and my name's on the headstone as well. I think that's a beautiful thing you can do. If that is something you'd like to do, see if your friends and family, or, specifically family, if they have thoughts on it. Like if you have kids, do they want to be with you in their end of life? Do they want to be buried next to you? Do they want to be on their own somewhere else? Invite them to be part of this conversation too, to help pick these locations. And interment can mean a lot of things. It can mean burying of a whole physical body. It can be the burial or containment of some manner of ashes too. Like again, my brother, we had him cremated, and we have the headstone is called a columbarium, and it's got spaces to put the cremains inside of it. So my parents' cremains can go in there as well, and mine if I so choose. But you can also bury ashes. And again, check with cemeteries. Some cemeteries will let you only bury once, even though ashes take up how much, like a little, think of an urn. I'm gesturing with my hands, but you can't see me. They take up that tiny amount of space compared to a whole body. They might only allow you to have one person or one cremain, one urn per plot. That's so stupid and shady in my opinion, but that's my opinion. That's, selling multiple plots for tiny little things is another great way for them to make money. Oh, God, I got my toe on that soapbox again. All right, stepping back down. So if you are choosing to bury remains, check with the cemetery. Is that okay? Do they even allow that? What are their, policies on that? So if you are planning a funeral or a celebration of life, start making decisions about that ahead of time. And I know I hear so many people tell me, I don't want a funeral. I don't want one. Nobody throw me a funeral. I don't want it. I don't want any of that. Okay. And that is absolutely your right to request that. I usually caution people when they tell me that tongue in cheek, I'll look at them and say, doesn't matter, you won't be there because they're dead. But funerals are for the living. Funerals are a way for the people that loved you to feel closure, to celebrate you, to show their respect for you, and show how much they love you. So, end result, if that is something you adamantly do not want, make that known. Let your family members know that you do not want a funeral. And it's, hopefully they'll respect that, but you also have to understand they may not, because they need to grieve you. And they might need a funeral or some type of celebration of life. Maybe tell your family, I don't want to have a funeral in a funeral home. If you want to do a big party for me, do it. Go for it. Have it somewhere else. Or maybe if, you're a very avid member of your church, you would rather just have a celebration at your church or a local bar. For me, guys, go down to a distillery in Kentucky. Get some bourbon. Go for a hike. I don't love the idea of a funeral for myself, but that's not up to me. And I've let my friends, family, and everyone know, do whatever works for you. If you do nothing, that's okay by me. I don't care. Because again, I won't be there. But, it's not up to me. Do what's best for you. So have those conversations ahead of time if you have very specific wishes. If you don't care, let them know that too. Let them know, guys, sky's the limit. Do whatever you want. I don't care. But planning, if you do want to do a traditional funeral, it can take some time. It can take a few days, weeks, whatever. And if you want to do it at a funeral home, typically those aren't scheduled until, after the person is deceased, because their schedules change a lot. We don't plan death all the time. So you might have to wait until the time of death to plan that. But if that cost is something you can pay ahead of time, go for it. But if the body, the deceased person, will not be physically present, as in open casket, embalmed body, whatever, if they won't be there, there's no real time limit on this. We had a funeral for my brother a few days after his death. I think it was a week or so. And then, we didn't take his ashes to the cemetery for like a year. And I've gone to other celebration of life ceremonies that happen months after somebody died. That's okay. You do whatever you want. There's no rules on this. Sky's the limit. If you want to have a big party or a vacation and you need a few months to plan it, go for it. Now, if there's going to be a viewing, that's a different story. That typically has to be done within a few days. So that's about it. Again, do as much pre-planning as you can. Think it out. Make a list. Have a list of things you like, you don't like, whatever. But don't be afraid to have these conversations with your friends and family. So, okay, as we are dwindling down before we get to the death deck, yes, I remembered this time, you guys. As I've mentioned in previous episodes, I am a member of a podcast collective called the Feminist Podcast Collective. And we are a collective of feminist podcasters who empower each other to grow our podcast through mutual beneficial collaborations. Again, I get no money out of this. I'm getting no sponsorships, no nothing. We are just here to support each other organically by advertising each other's podcasts on our episodes, supporting each other through social media, things like that. So with that, I'm going to throw in a super quick intro here for one of the other podcasts on this collective.
Welcome to the Scenic Route Podcast, the weekly podcast for smart, heartfelt entrepreneurs who don't buy into the generic online biz circus anymore and are ready to build a business around their desired lifestyle. I'm your host, Jennifer Walter, rebranding expert and sociologist, and I'm all for giving you the tools and insights you really need to build a life and business on your own terms. Every Tuesday, I release a brand new episode bringing you creative business ideas, insightful mindset advice, and candid stories from the lived experience of people who are thriving on the scenic business route. And for more of the Scenic Route, head to scenicroutepodcast.com for show notes, transcripts, and resources to help you build an aligned and successful business too. Don't forget to tell all of your friends that this show is now available to listen to completely free anywhere you can find podcasts. And please leave a rating and review, as they really help me get this podcast in front of more like-minded people. Now it's time to get your favorite brew and join me for candid and inspiring conversations around entrepreneurship, mindset, and building a brand and business on your own terms. This is the Scenic Route Podcast.
Okay, welcome back. And now it is time for the Death Deck. Woot. Okay, so I'm going to shuffle up the cards here. All right, I'm going to pull a card at random. Oh, golly. Okay. I think about my spouse or significant other dying tragically. A, every time they're late and don't report in. B, once in a while when they're on long road or plane trips. Or C, only when they do things that annoy me. I would be lying if I said I never thought about my husband dying tragically. He has a job that demands he get up on very, very high ladders at times, working with heavy equipment. And of course, I think about worry about him dying as a result of a fall. And he worries about it too. He says all the time how nervous he gets. And there's all sorts of safety precautions. He's not just running around up and down big ladders. I don't want that picture in your head, but there are a lot of safety measures and harnesses involved. So yeah, I would say I think about it sometimes. As far as the multiple choice answers on here, yeah, sometimes if I haven't heard from him in a minute, he's terrible at returning texts. I love you, honey, but God, He's really bad at returning text messages. And if I haven't heard from him all day and he also works late sometimes. And if it's getting to be pretty late and I haven't heard from him, I do get a little nervous. I'm not going to lie. I don't automatically sit there and think he's dead in a ditch, but the thought is there on occasion. You know what? I'm being vulnerable here with this, guys. It's okay if you think about these things. If you ever worry or think about a loved one dying tragically, that's normal. Don't think you're morbid or weird, okay? That's a perfectly valid thing to think about, especially if they're running late and you haven't heard from them. It's okay. You're allowed to have those thoughts. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in this week. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, all at Nikki the Death Doula. If you really enjoyed this episode, leaving me a rating or review would be so huge. That's how more people can find me. And also just show people that my show isn't a pile of garbage. So thank you. If you've already left a rating or review, awesome. You can also support me on Patreon. I talked about that top of the episode. And you can reach out to me through my website, nikkithedeathdoula.com. I'd like to know your answer to the death duck question, or just if you're enjoying the show. Podcasting is so lonely. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to join this collective is it's lonely back here. It's just me and this microphone and sometimes my cat. So hearing from my listeners is nice when I do. So feel free to reach out to me. If you have ideas for the show, or if you would like to share a story of a loss you have suffered, let me know. We'll figure out something to get you on my show. All right, guys. That's it. Thank you so much for tuning in. And remember, as always, your grief is yours. Your feelings are valid. Grief doesn't always have to suck. Good Grief with Nikki the Death Doula is produced by Nikki Smith of Nikki the Death Doula LLC in Columbus, Ohio. Nikki the Death Doula LLC is for consulting, education, emotional support, and guidance, and is no way considered a funeral establishment or licensed mental health establishment. Scripts, editing, sound design, literally everything with this podcast is done solely by Nikki Smith of Nikki the Death Doula LLC, with the exception of the music. The music is Cheery Monday by Kevin MacLeod. Licensing information can be found at filmmusic.io.